All right, folks. Hope y'all are having a good day. It's Saturday, October 24th, 2020. 2020. That is a big number for a year, isn't it? 2020. I realized moved some things around, and now my lava lamp is like not really in the frame anymore. So I don't know what I need to do for that. Just like, oh, it's hot. It's hot. All right. So, first big thing I want to cover today, NaNoWriMo, or National Novel Writing Month. So this is something that I've done content on, I guess for a couple of years now, right? So I did some last year, and I did some year before that, probably a year before that too. So last year, here's a book I wrote in November. If you don't know what National Novel Writing Month is, it's, I don't know. It's an effort to get people to try writing a book by writing a book in November. Trying to write 50,000 words in the month of November. So I wrote this book in November of last year and published it in December, Eyes in the Walls, and you can get it for, I think, $2.99. So good little horror book. And I came up with the idea on Halloween. So I did a stream on Halloween last year, or like the day before Halloween. I wrote down the plot line for the story, I think live on the air, and then I wrote the book. And then I published the book. So I did the entire process, including the publication part before the beginning of December. But it published in December on Friday the 13th because I thought that was a good day, and just because I like to have pre-orders and just have a little bit of space there. So I might do something like that again this year. I don't know if people are really that interested in it. If they are, then I can do some NaNoWriMo content. My general feeling, though, is that National Novel Writing Month tries to push like a sprint, or boot camp mentality, and I talk about this in this book. And what I encourage people to cultivate, rather than attacking, a goal for like a month and then not being able to finish it, is rather establishing a process that you can do every day for a long period of time, because that's what's going to deliver you the results that you want. And it's something that you can do, month after month, year after year, and produce more than just one book, but produce a bunch of books. So if you were to just look at the National Novel Writing Month, the NaNoWriMo goal of 50,000 words, it's very achievable even for somebody who's fairly new to the craft. It breaks down to about 1,600 to 1,800 words per day. And most people can do that. And if you can't do that, if you're super busy, this is why I go back to, establishing a good creative process. You could do 500 words. You could do 1,000 words. You can do 600 words, whatever it's going to be. So you can do something that will give you progress, something that will actually get you closer to your goals. You can do something like that, rather than just looking at like, I got to get to that 50,000 mark there. And there's nothing wrong with looking at a goal like that, like I'm going to get to 50,000, because that will help you focus on what you're doing, is that you're trying to work towards it. So there's benefits to sprints, and I talk about them in Keys to Prolific Creativity book, which you can get for $2.99 on Amazon. And the big benefits usually boil down to you're just really focused on what you're doing. It channels your focus, and then you can just not do that after a while. And to me, I think 6 weeks is probably about the limit for boot camp stuff. So if you're doing something at a really, really intense high level, like really intense diet, really intense exercise routine, really intense work routine, whatever it's going to be, 6 weeks tends to be about the limit. After 6 weeks, your motivation is going to start to falter because you've been grinding for so long that you feel like you need a break. And also what will happen is you will start to have possibly negative health effects from doing that for high intensity for more than 6 weeks. You're staying up too late. You're not sleeping enough. You get worn down. You start getting colds. You get sick because you're not letting your immune system recover through sleep. You're not able to focus when you're actually writing because you haven't slept in so long. Those sorts of things. So sacrificing for a temporary period is probably okay. But if you're like, I'm gonna sleep 3 hours a day from now on, that's not a good idea. Okay. So, yeah, National Novel Writing Month is a good thing. Gets people to get their feet wet. For a lot of people, 50,000 words will actually not be an entire book. 50,000 words will be some portion of their book. Now, I have specialized over the last couple years. I've made a direct attempt to write books that are shorter and more to the point and less full of padded pages that go nowhere. So one of the things I've realized, I read more and more modern fiction, is that there's just a ton of wasted space. There's a ton of pages that don't need to be in the book. And I find this hilarious because I guess the traditional publishing world, which isn't even traditional. Traditional publishing is actually self-publishing. It's what you did back in the 1800s and 1700s. But 20th century publishing, there's such a focus on revision. It takes years to revise your book, and at the end of it, it's worse than it began, and it's still way too long. It's like most Brandon Sanderson books, especially the newer ones, it's like if you handed them to me as an editor, I'd be like, we got to cut 70% of this. 70% of this is completely superfluous to the story that you're telling. You know, you have character scenes that don't have anything to do with plot. You have things that have to do with setting but don't have anything to do with the actual book that you're reading. You know, it just gets padded to some enormous, obscene degree, and people think, well, I have to write a book that's really long. So you just start throwing a bunch of crap in it that doesn't make the book good. No, you need to cut it down. The pulp masters of yore knew how to write a really tight 50,000 word book, and that's something that we should actually focus on, is trying to write a 50,000 word book that's good rather than writing a 100,000 word book that's boring. Right? Boring is probably one of the least excusable things that I can think of for writing sense. So anyway, I wanted to bring that up today and talk about how you can prep for NaNoWriMo and what they really focus on, because they only focus on one portion of the writing process. But if you prepare for it ahead of time, then you can make use of that energy. If people are keeping you on task, if it's getting you motivated to write, you can make use of that energy for the month of November and get a lot of work done. What are your thoughts on Ray Bradbury's advice on how to write a short story every week? He said that you can't write 52 bad stories in a row. It's probably correct. I think you notice a lot of the masters of the past. Was it Ray Bradbury? It's like you have to finish what you start. You have to publish everything you finish. You should not rewrite except according to editorial order, meaning like if you're publishing with a magazine, they're like, you need to fix these things. Then you fix them. But otherwise you don't rewrite because it's a waste of time. And I've seen this many times. It's probably correct. I think you're going to get better by writing more stories rather than by revising the same story over and over again, because you haven't written enough stories, especially as a beginner. You haven't written enough stories to know exactly what's wrong with something that you've written. You know, it's better if I were trying to edit someone's book, and I don't edit books, by the way, so don't ask for my services. But if I was, and if felt like it needed a huge rewrite, I would say, you know, here's your options. You can rewrite this book, or you can just write another book. You know, and most people, if they had the option, certainly me, if someone's like, you need to rewrite this book, I'll just write a different book. I don't want to write the same book again. That's like torture. You know, that's really not a fun process at all for me. So yeah, I mean, just write more stories. You're probably going to get better than if you are trying to revise the same story over and over again. NaNoWriMo is fun. Been doing it since 2013. Even finished it a few times. 1,666 words a day. Yeah, see, what I'd say is let's actually talk about planning what you're actually going to write. Because 1,600 words a day, that's if you're going to do it every day. But if you're being realistic, you're going to lose days, because if you're American, you have the Thanksgiving week. You're going to lose 4 days for Thanksgiving, because you have Thanksgiving Day, you have the day after with family, Christmas decorating. November is actually a terrible month for this, for most people who have any kind of life and family. And November is like one of the worst months. Probably the only worst month is December. January would be a good month. July would be a good month, but not November. November is a terrible month to do this. But whatever, people get interested in it. If you don't have a lot of family, then there's extra time over Thanksgiving. You know, you can not have Thanksgiving and spend your time writing your book instead, and probably get a lot out of that. Where's the borderline between bloated and epic world building? Well, it all comes down to execution. And I'll use Tolkien as an example. Everything that the characters come across, say in Lord of the Rings, has a name and it has a history. But Tolkien does not spend time writing about the names and histories of things which are not relevant to the story and which the characters don't come across. Rather, when they come across something, that's when he takes the time to introduce what the name of it is and what the story behind it is, anything like that. So I use that as a guide, because Tolkien's world building is more complex than 99% of most authors. But you're not aware of it when you're reading the books because it's so focused on the action, the plot, the characters, and the movement, the story moving forward with the adventure. That's really where you should go. So it really comes down to execution. So if I maybe complain about Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson will spend multiple pages in a book talking about magic systems and things like that, which are relevant to his story. So it's not like a big waste of time because the plot is built around those magic systems. At the same time, in some books, like in the Stormlight Archive, he'll have these interlude chapters that don't have anything to do with the plot of the book. They're just there for extra information about the world, and you're not even really sure of their relevance towards the world because they're often presented completely in a completely indirect fashion. It's like indirect exposition. You're just watching a scene full of weird things, and you're like, what do these mean? If you were trying to write a tight book for readers that want to read a book, not, I guess, a different kind of reader, a reader who wants to sit down and read a book and be done and be interested in the book all the way through, you would cut every single one of those scenes. He'll write scenes where characters are just talking to each other and it's supposed to be kind of funny and make you maybe like the characters. From an efficiency standpoint, that should be combined with a plot point. There should be some kind of forward movement on the story. Characters should never talk for the sake of it. But it doesn't matter. I mean, people like that. People enjoy character interaction, so it's fine. And there's people who like Brandon Sanderson's writing, even the really, really bloated versions of his writing. He can write tighter books, but he just usually doesn't. He really enjoys the bloated kind of world building. So I think it all comes down to execution. If you're spending all of your time talking about things that just aren't relevant to the story at all, like what's happening in some distant land, then it becomes bloated. So that's where it is. Marine Corps boot camp is 13 weeks. Well, I mean, is it 13 weeks? 6 weeks. 6 weeks is usually like the super intense trainings that I've noticed. It tends to be 6 weeks. Or like if you're looking at like Buds, it's a series of things, but they happen in like these, one's super intense in 6 weeks, and then there's another one that's like 16 weeks that focuses on different stuff. So if you're going for like maximum intensity, 6 weeks is probably, I mean, you could do 12 weeks is fine if the intensity is moderate. I'm talking about actual intense stuff, like not sleeping, like, eating, people who prep for a bodybuilding show. There might be a 12-week diet, but the intense part of the diet's like the last couple weeks, because it's just, you're not really going to be able to sustain that for an indefinite amount of time. And in fact, they're trying to peak for like a couple of hours. They're trying to like get all the water, all the fat out of their body for like 24 hours to do 2 different posing things. That level of intensity, the more intense it is, the shorter the duration needs to be. And to me also, misery tends to be measured by the duration, not the intensity. I should say misery it's how much time you have to endure it, not necessarily how intense it is. So if you have an itch on your back you can't scratch and you're itching all day, that's going to be horrific, versus a much more intense itch that you can then scratch after a couple seconds, right? So which one are you going to remember? I'm going to remember I had this little slight itch on the back of my neck that I couldn't scratch because I was in uniform or something all day long, and it drove me nuts, versus I had an itch on my hand and I scratched it and it was like the itchiest thing I ever felt, and then I felt relief. One of them is going to be more miserable than the other. So that's why I say 6 weeks. After about 6 weeks, you're probably like at your limit for what you can tolerate for like reduced sleep, overworking, not having fun, those sorts of things. Then you need to go back. That's why I promote like a more balanced approach to what you're doing. Have some fun every day, do some work every day, do exercise every day, eat correctly every day, spend time with your family every day, do the things that are good for you every day. Don't sacrifice your health every day, or you're just going to end up like dead, possibly. Right? People want to get their money's worth. That means a big, thick book. Now, this was actually a way of thinking from the 19th century. Books were like one of the main forms of entertainment that you could just buy. So authors would often pad books because there was a perceived value there. You get the same thing with games. People are like, this game is 100 hours. This is a 100-hour game. When I hear that, my next question is always, well, is it 100 hours of good gameplay, or is it 100 hours of boring garbage? Which is it? You know, because 100 hours of boring gameplay is far worse than 15 hours of good gameplay. And in fact, I think I care more about how, I get a decent amount of gameplay that's really enjoyable versus just a lot of gameplay that's boring. If the gameplay is not interesting, it doesn't matter how long the game is. Same thing with the book. If the book's not interesting, it doesn't matter how much, quote, value there is. I'm going to close the book and read something else. The reality is that I can, a 500,000 word book is still $9.99 versus a 50,000 word book is still $9.99. I'm not so poor that I can't afford to buy a shorter book, But in the 19th century, books were more expensive, and so that was actually a thing. It was like to get the value out of the book. So buy the Charles Dickens book that's really long. You get a lot of entertainment out of it. Revising the same story over and over again is very boring too. I don't think that's beneficial to your growth. What do you think? I don't think it is, because you haven't collected enough experience to know what's really wrong with the story or how you could do things differently. You haven't experimented with enough different kinds of stories to even find your voice, much less know how to dial it in. So, if you have the help if it's your first book ever and you feel like it needs revision, it's probably better to hire a professional editor to give you feedback on it. And if you have a really honest one, like I've had Brian Niemeyer on the show, he's very honest about stuff. He's like, might tell somebody that they should just write a different book, that it's going to take too much work to fix, and that's okay. Your first book, it's probably not going to be that good. It's certainly not going to be as good as your second book. So it's often better to just put that one to the side and write a new book. So I think you grow more by doing more different things. It's the same thing with playing music, by the way. So I've known two different approaches to performance, guitar performance, and they're basically the same as what we're talking about. So one is a person who knows very few pieces of music and is constantly working to try to make them better. And I knew lots of students like this. They learned 1 to 2 pieces on their guitar per semester. Now, I was basically in this funnel because that's the way most academic music tends to do it. It's like, you need to really perfect these 2 pieces. And I just thought that there was maybe a better way. So I came up with a different method. So what I did is on Monday, I went down to the music library and I just pulled out a bunch of pieces that I thought looked cool. I just looked at the score and I'm like, this looks like it might be a cool piece. And I take it and I go sight read them. So I do a bunch of sight reading on like Monday and Tuesday. And if I liked any of the pieces, I would learn them that week and I would try to perform them that week. So we had like it was called Convocation. It was basically like a free concert that anybody could show up to and play for free, like on a couple days a week. So I'd show up on Friday and play the piece that I learned. So I tried to learn a new piece every single week, and I did this for a whole year. So I learned 50 pieces. Now, the amount of improvement that happened for me in that 1 year was like 100 times greater growth than the people who were learning 2 pieces a semester and trying to really dial them in. Yeah, there were more mistakes in the 50 pieces that I learned to play, but I learned to play 50 pieces, so I had just a much bigger breadth of music that I'd learned. So when I was focusing on I could play music that was way harder than I could before, because I'd had all this, I'd had things come at different angles, you should subject your hands and your mind to thinking about 100 different things. That difficult thing, suddenly you can approach it from 50 different angles to break it down and figure out how to play it. So I was able to play much harder pieces at the end of that 50 weeks. And not only that, but I knew a whole hour of repertoire so I could go out and gig. I knew 2 hours of rep in some cases. So after like a year. So while people were like, I'm working on my second piece this semester, I'm like, I'm playing concerts 4 nights a week and making money. Which path was better? I think my path was better. I ended up as a better player than a lot of other people I saw, and as a better player than I would have been otherwise, and I was making money at the end of it. So it was just better from every single direction. Now, were there more mistakes? Yeah, there were more mistakes because I didn't have 6 months to prep a piece, to get rid of every single string buzz and every single little nail click and every single little slowdown with some difficult passage. I didn't have that. There were more mistakes, but there was a lot more music too. And the other thing I realized is most people, unless they have the score in front of them, they don't notice the mistakes as much as you do. The person who's intimately familiar with the piece are going to be more focused on the mistakes. And in general, people are listening for how the music makes them feel. So the mistakes in the end weren't even really a big detriment, but unless you have a good repertoire to go out and play, it's, what's the point, right? If you're not working towards that goal of having that hour or 2 hours, 3 hours to go out and perform concerts, to go out and play gigs, what's the point? So anyway, I did that, and I got a lot more growth, personal growth with that, and I also ended up making money. So that was good for me in general. I heard that President Trump only sleeps for about 3 or 4 hours a night. I hadn't heard that. I mean, I might believe it. Ronald Reagan was actually the same way. He slept like 5 or 6 hours a night. And as you get older, you sleep less in general. It's something that happens. I sleep on average 6 or 7 hours a night. I used to sleep 8 hours a night. So anyway, it depends. Like if you're using tons of if you're using like a lot of coffee or stimulants, you could probably do 3 to 4 hours a night. I did 3 to 4 hours a night for like periods, like a couple days a week, especially when I was an undergrad. But it'll start to really negatively affect your health, and your mind won't be as sharp as it needs to be. So if you can have your sleep, make sure you can have your sleep. You'll be healthier in general, thinner, stronger, sharper, better looking, all that stuff. Started reading Monster Hunter International by Larry Correia. Definitely cuts to the good stuff very fast. I would hope so. He knows what he's doing. I agree. Editing too much would be counterintuitive to growth because you overthink your original intent too much and becomes diluted to the point of being confusing. I've heard a lot of guys who've done both like indie publishing and the quote traditional publishing. And they're like, a lot of young authors end up revising their book to the point where it's just lost all meaning for them. All of their original artistic intent has been stripped away by the editors at the publishing house wanting a different kind of book than what they wanted to have. I know some people that, like Knox says, I can't function without sleep. I know some people some people need more sleep than others. I've had friends that they just have to have their sleep. They just need to have sleep all the time. And if they haven't had sleep, they're miserable all day long. Like they can't function. So if that's you, then you just have to accept that that's who you are and work around it, right? If you're somebody like me that can, if you miss it, if you don't sleep good at night, it's not that big a deal. If I don't sleep good like for a whole week, it starts to get to me. And I actually had that happen the last couple of weeks because my daughter, like her sleep was just crazy the last couple of weeks. I've gotten almost nothing done because I've been up with her till 1 a.m. and then she wakes up at like 6 or 5 even. So I'm staying up with her till 1 because my wife needs to go to sleep because she has to get up early to go to work. And I work from home, so it's whatever. And I'm waking up at 5 because, my wife's got to get ready during that time. So I'm sleeping 4 hours a night. Then by the time the baby goes back to sleep in the morning, my son's awake. So, I got to deal with him. And I'm like, okay, can you watch a movie for like 20 minutes in the afternoon? And I'm just like sleep in an easy chair for 20 minutes to just try to like get my mind cleared out so I can keep working. I've had that happen. It's been that way for like 2 weeks. And then you start to get really frustrated. You get to the kind of the end of your rope. You're like, oh man, I just want to be able to go to sleep and wake up at a normal time. And I want to be able to have 20 minutes, 20 minutes to work, right? Now I actually played World of Warcraft a little bit over the last couple of weeks, and I got a max level character having no time to play. Just like working, I'd be like, I could do a quick hour of work, play for 30 minutes, all of a sudden, max level character, right? That's how easy the game is right now. So I got limits to how much I can do when it's like less than 6. I haven't read War and Peace, at least the entire thing. Just need to sleep faster. This is what it's like. I know what you're saying, Arnold. I need 7 or 8 hours of sleep a night. For you, then sleep faster, I recommend. Yeah. So anyway, here's what you need to do to prep for NaNoWriMo. Okay, so NaNoWriMo is the drafting phase. There are 4 phases of book creation. First one is planning. That's what you should be doing now. Second one is drafting, where you're writing the words out. The third one is revision, which the better you get at the first 2, the easier the third one is and the less effort the third one requires. And then the fourth one is publication. And we often forget about publication because we have a lot of aspiring authors that get in the mindset where they have to beg an agent to talk to their friend they went to graduate school with at the publishing house to get their book published, and becomes like a please publish my book kind of thing. But if you're doing it on your own, that's its own phase with its own set of things that you have to do. Even if you're doing it traditionally, it's like you got to find an agent and write these query letters and come up with a synopsis and send that to agents and send it to 100 different agents and then rewrite your book because you lose confidence and send it to a different 100 agents. One finally takes it up and you get a deal and you finally get an advance for $200, and then you never recoup the cost of it, and that's the end of your entire writing career. That's the way it happens with most traditionally published authors. Is they get a book published and that's the only book they'll ever get published, or maybe they get 3 published, like a little 3-book series, and that's the end of it because they don't sell well. And what happens is the publishing house gives no support to the book. The book doesn't sell well. They're actually okay with it because they can destroy the unsold copies and write it off as a loss. So they get a tax benefit from it, and they help their friends in the paper industry. So the paper industry gives them a deal on paper. The whole idea is to sell paper. The books don't sell. They destroy the paper, write it off as a loss. The books get turned into toilet paper. That's what happens, and then they blame the author because the author didn't sell the book. Now, the author did everything the publishing house told them to do. They revised the book exactly the way they told them to do it. They spent years rewriting their book, having, diversity readers and sensitivity readers tell them everything that's wrong with their book. And then they finally get it published, and then the publishing house doesn't even advertise it or give it any support. And the author, which has spent all this time doing it, is blamed for it. You wrote a bad book, or you didn't make the book sell, so we're not going to publish any more books. And once you lose that deal with that one publisher, and that agent, you're probably never getting published again. So it is. So that's the path for most people who are traditionally published. If you're independently published, you do that stuff yourself. Your book's out way earlier. You're making money off of it right away. You could probably make more money off of each book over time because you're keeping all the money, even if you're selling fewer copies. But it requires a little more work for you on that phase 4. Like, you have to actually get a cover, you have to write a blurb, you have to publish it yourself, you have to do all that stuff yourself, you have to advertise it yourself. You got to learn a lot more crap. But you get to keep all the money, so it kind of evens out at least. And then you get to have more stuff that's out. Now that the Dems have gone mask off with their intent to punish Republicans by destroying them, wouldn't it make sense for the right to go reactionary route just to destroy Dems first? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I approve of what Donald Trump's doing in like excising critical race theory from the government. I mean, if you have control over the government, you can at least push out all of that stuff from the government and those parts of the government you have actual control over. You can actually engage in the spoils system as much as you want at that point. And really you ought to, because if you can get rid of all of these parts of like these human resource corporate cancer stuff from the government, it takes effort to put that stuff back in. So even if you lose control of the government, you are still a step ahead. If you never get rid of it, then as soon as you don't have power over it, it's going to come and bite you in the ass. A sensitivity reader is somebody who reads it to see if it would offend anybody, and then they have to change things. So, quick little news here. Let's look it up. So, Dragonlance. I've talked about Dragonlance a couple times. I don't have a book here by Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss. Long series of fantasy books. The first one's called Dragons of Autumn's Twilight. Maybe like original young adult kind of fare. Very pulpy, very action-oriented kind of stuff. Has been associated with the Dungeons and Dragons brand since the 1980s. The Dragonlance books, apparently Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss wrote another one, or at least probably another trilogy, because these guys are prolific. I know Margaret Weiss, she wrote her own series of them that was based off of them, and just would pump them out. These guys are good writers as far as knowing how to produce the books that they want. Wizards of the Coast was not letting them publish it. They're suing Wizards of the Coast. Let me see if I can look it up. I'll look it up. Dragonlance lawsuit. Basically, they had diversity and sensitivity readers read it, and they made all the changes that Wizards wanted them to make, and Wizards still refused to let them publish the books. So it's pretty interesting. And they're trying to gain control back of the Dragonlance IP. So they're suing Wizards of the Coast for unlawfully terminating their contract for a trilogy of novels to be published by Penguin Random House. Let's see if I could probably just show this to you guys. Give me a sec. Where is my OBS? Here we are. Here we go. Get this here. You can see what the heck we're talking about. Right. Oh, let's turn my camera on. Hello. Here I am. Okay. All right. So the complaint filed in Seattle on October 16th recounts the process authors went through beginning in 2017, during which time they met with Wizards of the Coast representatives and ultimately signed a publishing deal for a new trilogy of novels that were to be the duo's capstone to their life's work. We're talking like the end game of Dragonlance. By November 2019, the filing claims Weiss and Hickman had a deal in place with Penguin Random House and a complete manuscript of Book 1, which bears the provisional title Dragons of Deceit. Ooh, sounds good. However, by August 2020, during a meeting with Wizards of the Coast highest-level executives, the authors were told that no further drafts or any subsequent works in the trilogy would be approved. Further, the authors claimed the termination was wholly arbitrary and without contractual basis, and Wizards acted in stunning and brazen bad faith. The authors tied the termination of their contract to events around the same time when the company was suffering from poor public relations. Over the summer, stories emerged that alleged issues in Wizards of the Coast hiring practice and other forms of cultural insensitivity. In order to defend themselves from further criticism, the authors alleged Wizards and its parent company Hasbro killed the Dragonlance deal. Dragonlance emerged as the most well-known of TSR's Dungeons & Dragons campaign setting, in large part, the complaint alleges, because of Weiss and Hickman's Chronicles trilogy starting in 1984 with Dragons of Autumn's Twilight. So, anyway, just think about this from a business perspective, if you will. There's I haven't seen really any woke complaints about Dragonlance. But I'm sure there's people who will complain about it because it's European fantasy, right? European fantasy is bad. You have two authors who are proven bestsellers. They're going to publish something which is going to increase the value of your product, which is Dungeons and Dragons. And it's going to sell a bunch of money, and you're going to get part of that money. Why would you not let them publish it? You'd only let them publish it if you are acting in bad faith in regards to the health of the company. And there's another side note. I want to make another side note with this. There's this idea that floats around, and I'm thinking of this scene in Avatar with Giovanni Ribisi, and he's like doing putt-putt golf in this. He's doing putt-putt golf in this room on this planet, and he keeps talking about the shareholders this and the shareholders that. If you look at 2020 and recent years, the idea that executives care about money or the shareholders is nonsense. What happens is corporations are staffed by people, and the people that are in them have their own objectives that have nothing to do with the health of the company. So if they think they can do something which is part of their it's morally correct to do, like to get rid of the Dragonlance books. It's morally correct to do so. Then they're going to do that, and it doesn't matter if it hurts the company. They'll put out advertisements which insult their customer base because they feel their customer base ought to be insulted, not because it's good for the company. These are the things that they do. So the idea that corporations exist to make money, yes, on paper. But the problem is corporations are not staffed by robots who want to make money. They're staffed by people who don't care about that. They get a salary. It doesn't matter if the company makes more or less money. They'll get their salary anyway. But if they have any kind of power over the company, especially over public relations stuff, over any kind of media transmission, you're going to attract people who are going to want to use that for messaging purposes, and they're going to do what they want to do based on what they think they should do, what they wish they had power to do. To give them the power to do it, they're going to do it, and it doesn't matter if it hurts the company. That's what people need to know. Okay? The complaint goes on to note that Wizards went behind the backs of Weiss and Hickman to interfere with their relationship with Penguin Random House. That would be tortious interference. The August 13th meeting followed thereafter, in which Wizards attorney Nick Mitchell argued that we are not moving toward breach, but we will not approve of any further details. A decision that Weiss and Hickman argue effectively terminates their contract. The authors are seeking compensation for damages in excess of $10 million. Wizards of the Coast has not released a statement about the lawsuit. This is pretty simple. Like, why would you not engage in, you have this long-standing licensing agreement. It would be like if somebody has, you have James Cameron shot a new Terminator movie, and he's like, here's the new Terminator movie, it's done. And you're like, we're not going to release it because we had complaints about you, or we had complaints about someone unrelated to you, and we think Terminator is too white because Arnold Schwarzenegger is white. And so you just don't release a completed movie that's guaranteed to make money. It's completely ridiculous. Completely ridiculous idea. Gold Moon and Riverwind are probably an issue for diversity readers. Why is this American Indian blonde? You see, the funny thing is I never really got them as American Indians. I always thought of them as like Finnish tribesmen or something is what I never once thought of them as Native American. I kind of thought of them as like Finnish, nomads or something, or like Sami people, Oh, so you're one Dragonlance hero with a mustache dies. Homophobic much? Do you think a good and skilled author can make an amazing politically correct book that will please the PC people and those who are not? I don't know. I think a big 20th century idea was that art should offend. So I don't know. The problem is, like, if you went to it from the ground up, like, I want to make something that's super politically correct, you could probably execute it well, and it would probably please the PC people. But it would only please them temporarily, because there'd be something else in the book that becomes anathema in some future date, or anathema at some future date. And so once that happens, the goalposts just move and you become depersoned. So yes, you could temporarily please them. I think even like a movie like Boys Don't Cry will probably be derided and criticized by LGBTQ plus PRWX people in current year because there's something about it that is not politically correct for 2020, and therefore it's a bad movie, right? And that's a very well executed, I don't know what to call it, I don't think you would call it SJW movie, but it's a very well executed feminist kind of movie. I don't know, from that direction. It's well made for what it is, but it's probably bad because it doesn't. There's something about it which doesn't fit this year's version of how politically correct things are supposed to be. The characters are too white. There's too many white characters or something like that. Hilary Swank, they cast Hilary Swank and she's not trans. Therefore, no one should watch this movie. That would probably be the current one. What's your whole opinion on the whole free versus proprietary software situation? I'm not sure exactly what the situation is. Finish represent. Yeah. Um, Goldman and Riverman are generic barbarians, but in the art for the books, they were always Indians. Hold on. I want to make a counterpoint. Let me find the book. No, I have it. I don't know where it went. There it is. All right. So I think this is Gold Moon here. I think that's supposed to be Gold Moon. Right? That's the girl, right? She looks like a Finnish tribesman to me. And I don't think this is even the first version of the book that I read. So Dragons of Autumn's Twilight. I really like this cover, by the way. It just has great colors, like the purple, and just really good, simple design. This is a really good, well-designed cover. It's got people in it. It's got some great colors. No dragons, obviously, on the cover. But there you go. So I think she looks like a Finnish tribesman. You know, some kind of northern barbarian. Norwegian troll represent. Yeah, like the Sami people. That's what I imagine. I always imagine it was like, you know, I don't know, like primitive Scotsman or you know, it's one of those people. It's some kind of Nordic barbarian. I've had a problem reading books for many years now because I felt I could write a better one myself. Ate up Voices of the Void last Thursday in almost one sitting. Good job. Thank you for reading that. So that's a fun one. I wrote that one last year after my daughter was born and I wasn't sleeping, and I just had this weird dream that basically inspired the book. And I wrote it. I might write a sequel for NaNoWriMo. I don't know what I'll do for this, but I could write the sequel to Voices of the Void. I have another story in mind that's kind of like a variation on what that one was doing. So that one might be a good one to do. Yeah, the PC crowd always asks for more. You know, even if they're satisfied this year, Nox Arraeus has been his finish. And even if you satisfy them this year, next year it's a different set of requirements. And even though you met the requirements in the past, like a movie like Boys Don't Cry would meet their requirements in the past, it doesn't meet current requirements, so therefore it really shouldn't be considered. It's all about the current year. J.K. Rowling's a perfect example. The diversity mob will find something bad about you eventually. Oh yeah, eventually you'll cross them in some way. Riverwind might as well be the crying Indian from the recycling commercials, the way they usually do him dirty. Yeah. So are you saying you got the idea for the book from your dream? Yeah. I have like really intense, vivid dreams every single night without exception. And I've gathered after a while that that's not super typical. Like I have more dreams and I remember them to a greater degree, I think, than most people do. So that's one of the things that you get with me. So anyway, there's the Dragonlance lawsuit, which I think is pretty interesting. I hope they do well with it because, you know, they'd like to finish writing this epic long series. Kind of suck for people who are fans of the books. There's a bunch of books. There's like 30 books or something that you could read in the series. I've only ever read like the first 3, but you know, Dragons of Autumn's Twilight. They're not my favorite. I feel like they're so focused on moving from action set piece to action set piece, you never quite know what's going on or why. It's a different kind of approach to writing this kind of stuff, but definitely I think would satisfy younger readers who like to eat up this kind of stuff. And it's kind of like a D&D party. There's like a paladin and a half elf. It feels like classic D&D. It really feels like classic D&D, especially 3rd edition D&D. Yeah, Dragonlance is associated with D&D because the original cast of characters came from a D&D game Hickman hosted with a bunch of authors' friends. Now, a funny thing about that, if you've read Malazan Book of the Fallen, that was a GURPS campaign originally, is my understanding. That the world was something that... who wrote it? Who am I thinking of? It's actually two guys that wrote it. There's two authors associated with it. Anyway, they created this setting for a GURPS campaign and ended up first turning it into a screenplay, I think, and then novels. Can you control your dreams? No, not usually. The original Dragonlance trilogy and the Twins trilogy were great, both written by Weiss and Hickman. After that, it goes downhill. Yeah, I mean, I haven't read past that, but that's generally what I get. What is this? Short is more efficient than tall. Tall people are mutants. I don't know about that. I remember some kind of historic analysis, like the Vikings were taller than the rest of the people in Europe, not for some like genetic reason, like the men of the North are taller, but like they had better nutrition than the people of Southern Europe because they ate more animal-based nutrition, so they had more meat available rather than eating lots of grains and vegetables, which, if you're a little bit protein deficient or you have more food scarcity issues, then you are going to end up shorter. So the people in North Korea are shorter than the people in South Korea by several inches, I think, because the people in South Korea have as much food as they want to eat, and the people in North Korea don't. So if you grow up with malnutrition, your body doesn't grow as much. So the Danes, the people from Denmark and Sweden and Norway were all better fed than the people of Southern Europe, and therefore were stronger and taller. Modern things catch up, and you figure out, the average height, the tallest people in Europe are actually my people, the Dutch. The Dutch are the tallest people in the world. They weren't the tallest people in the world in the Viking Age, I think because they weren't as well fed. Maybe that's what it was. But anyway, I think the butter helped with the nutrition. Lots of butter, lots of meat. Big, strong, scary men when everybody else is like 5'8". Even then, I think also the idea of people being really short in the past is not entirely true. You made your doorway smaller, not because people were shorter, but because you wanted to let less air get out of your house. You wanted to keep it insulated. I think the average medieval Englishman was 5'11", and the average modern Englishman is 6 feet. He's a mighty 1 inch taller. He's 1 inch taller. So much taller. But I think in some parts of Southern Europe, they had more food scarcity. Anyway, it was one analysis that I've heard somewhere. I don't remember who said it, so I can't give you a source on that. It was just an idea. Like, they were bigger and stronger because they had better nutrition. I'd probably make Wurtler more diverse in terms of their influence. Maybe give them different powers or have them influence different worlds in different subtle ways. You'll see what's up. Have you ever rewritten any of your work? I've done extensive revisions to the point where it would count as large portions of it would count as rewrites. So this series, which was one of my very first books that I wrote, A City of Silver and Tyrant's Gallow, this one I did, it's kind of interesting. I did a big revision of it, and then I ended up changing things back closer to how they originally were because I liked them better the original way I wrote them. But this one has pretty extensive rewrites, and this one has pretty extensive rewrites as well. This one I cut a lot. I cut a crap ton out of this one just to make it tighter. It was full of extra world building stuff that just didn't matter. It just wasn't relevant at all to the plot. So I cut huge amounts out of this one. It's still longer than the first one by quite a bit. This one's like 35,000 words. This one's like 50,000. So next one will be about 50,000 words. Each one in this series, as I put it out, because I wrote like 6 or 7 of the books already, there's less work to be done to fix it. There's less fixing to be done because I got better at what I was doing. And if you get better at what you're doing, there's less to be done in the revision phase. You just can write it and go back and fix a couple things that kind of stand out to you as not working. And there's not that much else to do. Do all the Dutch split the bill at the restaurant? I don't know. They call it going Dutch. I always like paid. My wife's Dutch. I always bought her dinner. I think Asians are only shorter in size at the beginning of time. Well, the average height of certain ethnic populations is lower than others. Like some ethnic populations are taller, some are shorter. It doesn't really matter that much, though, like when you get down to it. Like, the ancient Romans were not as tall as the people they conquered in many cases. Were they somehow a weak little nation of those weak little Italians, conquering the Franks that were taller than them? It's like, who cares? Like that's just one little thing. It's not a big enough difference. It's not like hobbits fighting trolls or something. Okay, it's like these people are 3 inches taller than those people on average. It doesn't even mean that you can't have tall. It's like, oh well, Dutch people are on average 3 inches taller than Chinese people. So it doesn't mean you can't have tall Chinese people or short Dutch people. My wife is Dutch. She's short. So I don't know. It's just an average. My 65-year-old aunt caught CV, coronavirus, about a month ago. My 89-year-old grandmother caught it recently. They both felt sick for about one day. They were back to normal. Trump apparently wasn't sick for that long. I've talked to a couple people who were in the hospital for a while and were, normal healthy age. You don't know quite how a sickness is going to affect you. My grandmother had West Nile virus at one point. She's 93, I think. So, you never know quite how those things are going to affect you. It's like, oh, well, my cousin, he had chickenpox and the chickenpox ended up down his throat and he had to go to the hospital. Yeah, most people don't get chickenpox that bad. But because chickenpox could be bad, you probably don't want to get chickenpox or you want to vaccinate for chickenpox. It's the same thing. I don't recommend you get it. For me, I had like 3 days of fever, which was very uncomfortable and I really felt bad. My son was sick for like 1 day. There's different strains of coronavirus, by the way, of this coronavirus. There's a New York strain and there's a Seattle strain, depending on where they came in. What I got really sick from was like a secondary infection, like a bronchitis or pneumonia infection. It was like I was like coughing up blood. It was really bad. So I got SARS symptoms basically after the virus itself was done with its primary symptoms, and it was very, very uncomfortable. And I had to go to the hospital. So I don't recommend you get it. And it's if you take basic precautions, you'll lower your risk by a lot. So I think I predicted at the beginning of the year, if you did nothing, we'd have 500,000 dead. So we've done stuff. We'll see if we get to 500,000. So 500,000 was the number that I said. And that was assuming similar virology to the flu. This is actually more contagious than the flu, but we'll just do similar virology and similar infection rates to the flu. So if the same number of people got coronavirus as got the flu, which is, we're not even there yet, you'd be looking at about 500,000 people dead associated with that. That's a lot. That's like the entire city of Fresno being wiped off the map. So that's a huge amount of people. And we'll see if we get there by the new year. That was my prediction. I think we're at 200,000 or something like that, which is a lot. 200,000 is like Modesto, California being wiped off the map. Okay. Or Bakersfield's 300,000. So you get to 300,000. It's like no more Bakersfield. But because things are spread out, we don't think in large numbers correctly. 500,000 people dead is a huge number. That's a very big number. Okay. That's like an atomic bomb being dropped somewhere. Okay. But because the deaths aren't concentrated, people don't think of them in the same way. Do you think you need a huge gap between first and second drafts? I read a suggestion that you should take several weeks to a month to gain a fresh perspective. Your thoughts? It depends. Depends on your... I think it's probably a good idea to put a little space between it, because then you are able to look at your draft a little more objectively. So you don't have kind of floating around in your mind the intent of what you did. You just are able to look more clearly at what you did. And if you realize the intent wasn't clear, you can revise. You can fix those little things. So it's good to put a little bit of space. For me, I usually I'll finish a first draft, then I will put that to the side and I'll start working on publishing material. So I'll design a cover, I'll start doing blurbs, I'll start setting all of that up. Then I'll go back after a couple days is usually enough for me to gain a new perspective on it, and then I'll look at it and probably publish it. In some cases, if I come back a year later, what happens? There's a flip side to this. Let me get the flip side. So we come back a year later. What I realized looking at stuff that I put aside for a long time, like a year, is that it's way better than I thought it was. Then I start to lose confidence. I kind of finish up a draft and I'm like, man, I just don't think it's that good. I'm worried it's not that good. I go back and read it the next year. I'm like, this is good. I really don't have to change anything about this. This was really, really pretty good. And I can just publish this book as it is. I have like 2 or 3 books that are that right now. I just haven't been able to kind of, I don't know, get motivated to do all of the design work to get everything put out there, or find a cover designer and just pay them for a cover. I'm probably gonna have to do that for one of the books, because I'm just not sure how I would design it to like look the way I want it to look. But I don't know. I'll figure it out as we go. So in some cases you end up, because you lose confidence. It's something that happens. We don't often talk about it. Is you start to lose confidence in the story, like the more you're with it and the more you think, is this really convincing? Is this really going to work? Are people really going to believe this? Is this character too stupid? Like, you just start to doubt yourself. You give yourself a couple months, you come back and look at it, you're like, no, it's actually really good. And so you can see that maybe your lack of confidence was something else. But you don't need a huge gap. A little gap is pretty good, because then you've kind of let things fall out of your mind as far as your intent, what you think this or that is supposed to do, and you're able to look at it more objectively. My grandmother had smallpox. It wasn't that bad. Yeah, I've heard chickenpox, Candiff. I've heard chickenpox is way worse as an adult. Basically, it's like shingles. My wife has had shingles like 2 times. Really bad. So yeah, you don't want to get it if you can avoid it. My country is currently drowning in new cases. So this is what happens here in California. They're like, no one's allowed to do anything. Can't go to the park, can't go to the restaurants, nobody can do anything. And it's like, well, we're going to have a riot. Go ahead and do that. Go ahead and burn the city down, have as many protests as you want. Where did all these new coronavirus cases come from? We got to lock down harder. So it's like, guys, reducing, having like shelter in place, or reducing interpersonal contact for a limited period of time can be effective, but only if you actually do it. If you're like, okay, nobody gets to go to stores or restaurants, but you can all hang out together in the street in a crowd of 700 people. That's not, it's gonna negate any kind of other effort that you're doing, right? And actually, I think like it's one of those things where a lot of the people, a lot of the white people here are like, coronavirus is BS because nobody got it. Or like, very few people got it. And it's like, well, very few people in your group of people got it because you guys all wore masks and washed your hands and didn't go to the store. But it's like, we look at all the people getting coronavirus here and it's all like minorities and stuff right now. It's like, oh, this is disproportionately affecting poorer neighborhoods. It's like, because they weren't doing the same things. So it ends up with a more localized effect too. It becomes like a racial thing. Why aren't white people getting coronavirus? Well, they did what you told them to do. They stopped going to church and started washing their hands and wearing masks, and then they didn't get it and thought it was all BS and it didn't exist. It's kind of there's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing, right? Where like if you do something to prevent something and it's effective, you don't see it because there's no alternate universe where you can see what would have happened had you not do it. It's kind of like child sex offender registry. There's this whole group of people that want to get rid of the sex offender registry because somebody that they heard of on the registry ended up there because they got caught urinating in public instead of raping somebody, right? And they're on the sex offender registry for 10 years because they got caught nude in public, right? And they're not really a sex offender. It's like, okay, I feel bad for that one little exception there. It's like, we're not, 80% of molestation cases are from people who've never been convicted of it. Doesn't mean they never did it before. There's all kinds of little survivor biases that they just ignore. And it's like, if you know about a sex offender in your neighborhood because you could look up the sex offender registry, then you took actions to prevent your child from being molested by that sex offender, if the crime never happened, so it doesn't exist. And so it's easy for people to say like, well, they don't work because these offenders are not molesting children. It's like, maybe they're not molesting children because people are actually preventing it from happening. Or if you as an individual prevent your child from being a victim, somehow it's not effective because it didn't happen. It's like, oh, we don't have an alternate universe where your child gets molested, and nor do we want that. So getting rid of something like sex offender registries always comes down to people engaging in a kind of survivor's bias, where they think that because some large percentage of cases are people who haven't been convicted before, doesn't mean that sex offender registry is effective. In fact, if you look at it, it's like 90% of people who get convicted have never committed the crime before. It's like, maybe that's because the sex offender registry is actually working. You would expect that. You would expect that percentage to go up if the sex offender registry is working. And as far as I know, it actually has. Anyway, this is one of those things that libertarians get on and on about. They're like, they want to get rid of the sex offender registry. It's like, it's an overstep of the government and this and that. People are on it for life. It's like, yeah. Well, I mean, rapists are on it for life, but other than that, no. Or some really far-fetched exception where it's like, okay, why don't you petition the governor to get him off the sex offender registry? When you type the draft, do you correct the mistakes after finishing or while typing it? It depends. If I'm writing a bad sentence, I'll rewrite the sentence. I'll correct things a little bit as I'm typing, but I don't stop and go back and fix previous things in the manuscript. I'll make a note if there's something previous in the manuscript I want to fix. I have like a big running note of revisions. Then when I'm done, I go back and fix that. I try not to edit as I write. At the sentence level, I do it, but beyond that, I really try not to do it. We should ignore the biggest chunk of coronavirus deaths are in populations that have a 50-50 chance of dying on any given day. Yeah, people that are high risk. But that still doesn't mean that like they would have died anyway, right? So if somebody with type 1 diabetes dies of coronavirus, yeah, the type 1 diabetes put them at a much bigger risk. But if they hadn't gotten coronavirus, they'd maybe still be alive, right? That's the way a lot of these things work. Works the same way with flu. You know, most of the people who die of the flu are the elderly, or they get the flu and then they get pneumonia and then they die of the pneumonia, right? So people are like, oh, this person didn't die of coronavirus, they died of pneumonia. It's like, yeah, but that was aggravated by the coronavirus. Or they died of heart failure. Yeah, but they wouldn't have died of heart failure had they not been currently sick with 104-degree fever and coronavirus, right? So it's going to aggravate any other risk that you have going on. So for most people, like especially children, like my son was sick for like a day. Like children are probably not going to have, probably not going to really get sick at all. Like your children are really not at risk of them getting sick. The only risk is if like your children are also having contact with your grandmother who is on kidney dialysis. That's the risk, right? It's really the grandma with kidney dialysis is probably a much bigger risk. Some people have brought up the point that during a multi-factional civil war in the U.S., the electric and water plants will become high-value targets. Does that sound true in your opinion? Yes. You know, just look at, San Francisco or something, or Manhattan. It's like you cut the power to Manhattan and it's going to be wild. But I don't think we're there. I don't think we're anywhere close to that. Now Newsom won't loosen restrictions until the rates of COVID in minority groups are proportional. That's where we're at. It's like, well, they were the ones protesting, you know. They were the ones not following the, quote, following the rules. Oh, super chat. Thank you, Frank. My creative output has doubled since the lockdown began in March. Been able to churn out a short story a couple of weeks. Your videos continue to help me with building small habits. Hope all is well. Keep up the good work, man. Thank you. Thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that you've been productive. I haven't been as productive because, like, initially my wife was working from home, so then it became a little bit more complicated to do that kind of stuff. Then I got sick. And so when I was sick, it was a little bit hard to work, and that just put a big dent in my schedule. So I've been actually less productive, I think, than normal. And that's just because it's just less time. I've just had less time to sit down and work. I've gotten a lot of work done, but I won't see the results of it probably till next year for a lot of stuff. What if minority populations are catching it more often because more of them are out in the streets protesting? It's like, yeah, that's part of it. They also just are much less likely to engage in. So this isn't like this really just has to do with ethnic lines, is like things which are standard in one, I guess, socio-ethnic group are not going to transfer automatically to another one. So if it's really standard for all the white people to wear masks, they're very compliant and wear masks, then they get some effect from it, right? They get lower transmission by a little bit. And then, but if it's not really standard for blacks to do it, it doesn't mean that they're going to look at the whites in the next neighborhood over and then do that. Some will wear the masks. Some are like, I don't care about that. And then, that's what you end up with. All right. And so different groups, different socio-ethnic groups tend to act like socio-ethnic groups, and the habits don't cross over one to the other. We also have very big protests right now because the Constitutional Tribunal wants to ban abortion in cases of serious defects and health problems. Abortion is already banned with 3 exceptions: a threat to the mother's life, serious defects, and rape. Are you from Poland? Based Polish viewer. Well, I mean, this is something I've thought about for the United States. Abortion, when it was legalized by the court, was very unpopular and has gotten more unpopular since. But no politician has ever bothered to try to hold a constitutional convention to add an amendment banning abortion. We added an amendment that banned alcohol and everybody drank. So we probably added an amendment that bans abortion if people really wanted to do it, but the politicians don't have the will to do it. Republicans are not going to really hold a constitutional thing that's going to have the press attacking them and going through their garbage for years on end. They just don't want to do it. Something weird about the Dragonlance world. All of their goblins had one nostril in the center of their faces. Just an odd detail to create. I forgot about that. That is a good one. I liked in the Hobbit cartoon, the orcs had like 2 esophaguses. They had like 2 gullets. So they opened their mouth and it was like 2 of them put together. It looked really cool. I figure masks fail to provide a net benefit for health. Well, they do mathematically, and they work. And you can also look at, if we don't have a parallel universe, but we do have other countries. So the other countries that just did all this stuff, like Japan, they're back to normal. And I said this months ago, what this reveals to me is that the United States has no unified culture. They're completely, it's a nation of atomized, selfish individuals that have no ability to just conform to social standards, even if it has massive benefits to the group. So Japan, they're back to normal. A lot of these Asian countries, Korea, they're back to normal. They did it for a couple weeks and it worked, and then went back to normal. Now they're not 100% back to normal, but masks and washing your hands work if everybody does them and it's effective. And in fact, if masks are even fractionally effective, they can actually reduce transmission by a number that's higher to that due to the way mathematics work, due to convexity of that. So if you have a person, and let's say no one wears masks, one person is going to infect 10 other people. Everybody wears masks. They're marginally effective, let's say. Let's say they're not using... I wore N95 masks, and I bought those in bulk, as I told you guys to do before the pandemic hit. But let's say they're wearing marginally effective masks that reduce transmission by 50%. A 50% reduction doesn't mean that person infects 5 people. It actually means that as the generations go on, he infects 5, those 5 infect 5, those 5 infect 5. You end up with, 250 people being infected versus like 2,500. So because these things are multiplicative and you're actually cutting short the multiplicative value, even with marginal effectiveness, you can reduce transmission by up to 90%. Mathematically, it does work out. The epidemiologists have gone over this. You don't have to take my word for it. Experts from MIT, Nassim Taleb has gone over the math for it. And you can look at the Asian countries where with extremely high conformity to those norms, they were effective, and then they were able to stop doing them very quickly. The thing is that what you have to have a hard look in the mirror about is you're going to have marginal effectiveness with zero conformity for a long period of time. Of course, it's not going to be very effective. It's going to be very marginally effective over time. So at what point do you say, okay, we wanted everybody to do it and everybody refused to do it, so do we keep trying to make people do it? Like, what do you do? I don't know. Something weird about Dragonlance world. All of their goblins had one nostril in the center of their face. Okay, I already read that. I'm willing to go into quarantine, but that's it. I mean, we did that. We did that, but that's supposed to be temporary. The whole point is that, if, like I said, let's say you have patient 0 and he infects 10 people. Those 10 people infect 10 people. Those 10 people infect 10 people. So you have 1 to 10 to 100 to 1,000. So in a couple generations of people transmitting the virus, that a couple weeks you have 1,000 people that have it instead of 1. We're just using the number 10, I think, because it's easy, but I think it's probably lower than 10 is what you can expect. I'm not a virologist, but epidemiologists have figured out a lot of this stuff already. Now, if you cut that short, if you say, okay, we recognize we have 100 people infected, we do a quarantine, and then those 100 people infect, instead of 10 people each, they infect 2 people each. We have 200. And then those 200, all of a sudden, we've gone from 1,000 going to 10,000 to just in the hundreds. And then it just slowly will start to fade off because people start to gain, the virus burns itself out. I think coronavirus is interesting, though, because it doesn't burn itself out that quickly. It's not like Ebola. Ebola kills people so quickly, it's hard to have an infection take hold because you don't have people that are well enough to spread the virus. Coronavirus, you have tons of people that are healthy enough to go spreading the virus around. So it's been a very interesting one. Asian self-quarantine, anyway. It's not, there's a word for it. It's called hikikomori in Japan. And it's actually a cultural problem. And you can look it up. Hikikomori is people that become shut-ins. They don't leave their apartment except maybe at night. They don't interact with other people. They just completely withdraw from any kind of external life and become total shut-ins inside their house or apartments. And that's the Japanese word for it. And it's become somewhat of a cultural and societal problem as it's increased. They also have problems with like lots of men not wanting to marry and things like that, wanting to be hikikomori or just to be neats, to just not be gainfully employed, just play games at home and live on the bottom. I actually wrote kind of a story about this, so let me link it. Free story on my website. It's called Jimmy Turns 35. Check it out. This is Jimmy. He's kind of an underachiever. He delivers pizzas and plays video games, and at a certain point he realizes he wants to do more than that. Check out this. Look at me from every angle. Woo! The entire problem is that no legislation for the coronavirus has been narrowly tailored. That's part of it. Virtually none of it treats different risk groups differently. That's very true. It's kind of like heterosexual AIDS. MGTOWs are something different. MGTOWs are not necessarily hikikomori or something. Yeah, MGTOW's a different thing. So, the myth of heterosexual AIDS. This is a thing if you were around in the 90s, is that they were constantly like Oprah talk shows, regular heterosexual people are getting AIDS. There's an AIDS epidemic in heterosexual people. And it was all just a big lie. And it was always the main risk groups were gay men and intravenous drug users, because they engaged in behaviors that spread it, and there was a lot of the virus already existing in those populations. So rather than kind of directing things really focused towards those groups, you just kind of told everybody to like rubber up and be afraid of of AIDS without realizing that different groups had different things going on with that, you know. And the truth was that it was still, and it still is, very much concentrated in those two groups, and still spreading a lot among gay men. In fact, there's even like people who fetishize getting the virus, bug chasers, gift givers, and all that kind of stuff. It gets very weird after a while. Oh, super chat, thank you. Any thoughts on Tad Williams' fantasy books? And I don't think I've read any. Let me see if there's one I read, because it sounds so familiar. I'm thinking of one. But I don't remember it. I don't remember the name of it, which means I probably didn't read it. There's so much fantasy literature out there I haven't read. You know, because I read a lot of other stuff that's not fantasy too. The very best of Tad Williams. Let's see what some of his popular ones are. The Dragonbone Chair. Empire Grass, that's pretty new. Remember who was trying to get me to read Tad Williams? Someone else was. Yeah, MGTOW, men going their own way. Now, I have my own problems with MGTOWs, that they don't really understand reality, and I think the current online MGTOW movement, at least, is mostly young men who are frustrated with their with women on some level, and so they say that they're going to be MGTOWs and like lift weights and not talk to women. And it's not really like older divorced dudes, which is kind of what it originally was. There are also politicians that don't want to give up the emergency powers that quarantine gives them in certain states and want the economy to suffer. I don't know if they want the economy to suffer. I think it's more like there's like a thing called perpetual belief. You know, they really like having the power to enforce that stuff, but I don't really think it's that. I think it's more just they have a perpetual belief that if they just keep, it's kind of like a demon whispering in your ear, that if they keep doing it, eventually the thing that they're told will happen, that they'll be thought of as a savior. MGTOW, when you're so burned by women, you just quit female relationships and work on your own happiness and success instead. Kind of. The problem with online MGTOW culture is that that's not actually what they do at all. What they do is they spend copious amounts of time making MGTOW content, trying to convince other men to be MGTOWs, and posting on MGTOW content, talking about how much they hate women. So that's the online MGTOW group, which I don't really want to treat differently than just like men who decide that they're not going to focus on female relationships. I've had different points in my life where I didn't focus on female relationships at all and avoided them because I needed to focus more on other things in my life. Was I MGTOW? Like, I don't know. But certainly, like my experience with the online MGTOW guys is, my favorite thing is when they love to cite divorce statistics, as though divorce is a random event that has a fixed probability that just afflicts you. It's like, just magically one day, divorce afflicted me. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. Divorce is something that's a result of your personal choices and actions, just like going to jail. Like, you wouldn't say, well, here's a black man. He has a 30% chance of going to prison. It's like, no, he doesn't, because statistics don't work that way. Him going to prison or not is a result of his personal choices. Prison is not something that afflicts him with some fixed probability at random, okay? So the online MGTOW groups are just completely toxic, and you should always avoid them if you can. They also are completely out of touch with reality, and they're all LARPing as alpha males when most of them, because they refuse to show their faces or their physiques, they're not that. They're guys that are burned by women on some level. They had like a bad relationship with a girlfriend, and MGTOW is kind of how they're dealing with it, and it makes them feel like they're doing something empowering in their lives to avoid women, and maybe they are. But they certainly do spend way too much time online trying to create a MGTOW community with other men that is primarily focused around how bad women are and that sort of thing, right? Now, I say that as a married man. It's difficult for younger generations, I think, to get married these days than it was for mine. I've been at enough dinners and benefits and heard liberals speak their minds in safe environments, and now know they'll use any excuse to promote eugenics or population control. Yeah, they actually really do believe in eugenics and population control. That's something they actually really do believe in. And so they will use excuses to do that because they really sincerely believe humans are bad, just bad. It's bad that they exist. They've never really thought that much about how wrong population science has been in the past. Like, it's never been right in the past. So what makes you think it's going to be right in the future? I do the same thing, honestly, with the global warming stuff. It's like they've never predicted anything in the past. Why do you expect them to predict it in the future? Well, this time it's different. This time the money that they're getting in grants from the government is being used for things that are true. It would be difficult at all to segregate operation hours for different age groups. But no, stay at home and drink the soy. It actually wouldn't be difficult. You're right. I mean, and to be honest, like, so, I have some high-risk family members, and I would have taken the same precautions I took during this entire time to protect them, no matter what, right? So it wouldn't change anything about what I did. But, if you're just like some farmer out in the middle of nowhere, you don't need to wear a mask. Bug chasers are an interesting phenomenon. That is, don't go too deep down that rabbit hole. It's a little bit disturbing. The ghoulish manner in which they describe efforts to promote contraceptive use in the Southeast Asia. We promote it as a women's rights issue, but it has beneficial side effect. Yeah. It's like we need to promote contraception in Africa. This is a big one. This has been one for 20 years. Like, there's overpopulation in West Africa. We need to be out there giving out abortions so that there's not so many people so they're not starving to death. If you actually took some time to try to understand some of the localized problems in different places in Africa, you realize it has virtually nothing to do with some carrying capacity of that particular place, but it has to do with military conflict. Like, they're at war, there's ethnic conflict, ethnic cleansing, civil wars. Things like war disrupt your food supplies in really profound ways. So, yeah, there's famine in places in Africa, in different countries in Africa. It's virtually none of them, it's the result of some inability to produce enough food. They have low population densities. They have population densities of like Georgia. And they produce less food than Georgia. And they're in a tropical environment, which means they have a 12 months out of the year growing season. They could grow as much food as they need to, probably. It's not about them growing enough food. It's that they can't grow the food without warlords coming in and stealing it. They can't eat the food without somebody killing them. Like, it has more to do with just the horrible environment that they're in rather than some population thing. They're not starving because they can't grow enough food. They're starving because they're in the middle of an ethnically cleansing civil war. I'm convinced the hetero AIDS trip was half to forestall homophobia and half just to promote contraceptive use generally with the threat of death. Yeah, I think you're right. They also think the thing about hetero AIDS too is like this, some random heterosexual person got AIDS. It's like, okay, that's still not the main way people get it, or this guy is a heterosexual and he got AIDS and he was only having sex with men on the down low occasionally. It's like he was still engaging in gay sex. That's how he got it in a lot of cases. The problem with MGTOW is that a lot of them are actual misogynists. They treat women as animals or inferior race. A lot of them do. A lot of them don't, though. A lot of them just view Western relationships with women as being not worth the time or energy that they want to put into it. That's like the standard thing. So they just are going to, quote, go their own way. But the online community very much enforces a one worldview thing. That's really not about going your own way. It's about subscribing to a religion. It's kind of I view it as kind of the flip side of like militant feminism. Like, men are bad. On this side, it's women are bad. Here's all these statistics that say women are victimized by men. Here's all these statistics that say men are victimized by women. It's just the same thing, approached from a different direction. It is something that I think is part of the death cult and separates men and women from each other and from understanding each other in a mutual way. And it's not to say you have to be engaged in a relationship with someone in the opposite sex all the time. No, you don't. If that's not for you, then that's okay that it's not for you. You get to choose that as an individual. Pair bonding and family making, baby making new citizens is strangely officially a non-topic in government, but I suspect behind the scenes they spend a lot of time on it. Yeah. Well, they don't want people to make native babies, but they want to import immigrants. They're like, hey, you're not making enough babies. Well, you tax us to death so we can't afford children. Well, we're going to bring in immigrants to replace you. Literally, what's this conspiracy about white people being replaced by immigrants? Well, yeah, we're replacing them with immigrants. You have two articles next to each other. We need more immigrants because we have to replace the white people. It's like white people are our conspiracy theorists for thinking we want to replace them. It's like they'd like to replace them with people who vote a certain way. They tried to cancel Chris Pratt for not going to a Biden fundraiser. He wasn't the only one to not go, but was singled out because he's Christian and rumored to be right-leaning. Yeah, that's dumb. It's like you have to enforce. It's not just like enforcing. Don't talk about Trump. It's like you have to openly declare your allegiance to Satan, or else you will be stricken from the economy. It's the mark of the beast. It's a bestial economy. Humans are bad in that they're fallen, but this badness cannot be corrected by similarly bad humans with bad population science. I agree. A good portion of liberals seem to believe humans are killing the earth and that the population should be controlled in some way. Yeah, killing off farmers and to redistribute the land is also a bad idea for food production. Yeah, the knowledge that the white farmers used to produce food wasn't transmitted to the people who took the land. Because it's not land that makes the food, it's the farmer and his knowledge of how to cultivate the crops that does. So if you take a farmer and put him out in the fields, he won't know how to grow the food. You take the farmer and put him in the surgery room, he won't know how to fix a patient. That's how it is. But they've actually done this in socialist countries. Like Pol Pot did this. Took the doctor and put him out in the fields. Took the peasant and put him in the operation room. Because he believed all of that was artificial and that you could correct the imbalance by just rearranging where people were. Same thing with affirmative action. It's just a greater degree of affirmative action. And the result was millions of people dying. Native babies don't consume as much as adult immigrants, and immigrants produce more babies for future consumers than the natives. You just got to make it cheaper to have kids. Get rid of, just cancel. Here's what you should do. Cancel all student debt. So the government holds a big portion of the student debt. All of it should be canceled. That every dime that the government has should be canceled now. Some people who've already paid off their student loans, they get less benefit. Other people who haven't paid them off, they get more benefit. We're throwing that to the side. We don't care. We're caring about the net total benefit to our society. We have the capacity to cancel them. We cancel them now. The rest, which are privately held, you pay down by seizing the endowments of all the universities. I got this idea from Brian Niemeyer. So I'm stealing it from him. You seize the endowments from the universities to pay down all the debts because they sold a product in bad faith. They sold a product at an inflated price to people who did not have the knowledge to actually buy that product correctly and to understand its value, and victimize them by putting them into infinite debt that they can never pay down, even with bankruptcy. Even if they're completely dirt broke on the street, they will always have their student loans. You have to get rid of them. It's a crisis that you need to address sooner or later. Now's the time to address it. If Republicans had actually pulled their heads out of their asses and did this, it would have changed a lot of minds and would have changed a lot of hearts too. So you cancel all student debt. So that's the first thing. Now young people have enough free economic resources that whatever job they happen to have, even if it's not the best economic job ever, they don't have this monkey on their back called, I went to college for 4 years because my mom and pop told me to go to college for 4 years. And I got $80,000 worth of debt that I can't pay down. They now have enough money to settle down, have kids, and have a family life that they want to have. So that's a big one that you can do. Student loans are huge. Beyond that, it's all going to be local stuff. Can you create housing that's cheap enough for young people to buy into it? If they can buy into it when they're young, then they'll have kids when they're young too. And the younger that you start having kids, the more kids you can have. The more kids you can afford to have, the easier it is to take care of the kids because you're young and full of energy and all that good stuff, So that's what I think you should do. Do you think sexuality becoming more and more sensitive, fear of sexual harassment, will cause a resurgence of the cult of virginity and waiting till marriage with sex? Okay, so my short answer is yes, and I think we're already seeing it here in the United States, but it's not a culture of virginity. Rather, it is more such a strong form of risk management that's the end result, is that men really only, we're just not, like in the corporate world, this is a general thing that you do. You just don't have social relationships with women in the workplace. You just don't do it because there's too many risks. You're not sure if that person could take a joke the wrong way, and then we could have a sexual harassment issue if you tell a dirty joke or an off-color joke, or even if you compliment a woman. Now, if you compliment a woman, you're like running the risk of that. If you're like, hey, that dress looks good on you, or you look good today. If you compliment a woman's appearance, you just don't do it. So like men are completely avoiding it in the workplace, which is where they used to meet women a lot. So you end up kind of with this result where it's like women who are totally trad are the ones that they're going for because they feel secure buying into that woman. They feel a lot more secure buying into a woman who's like traditional and religious because there's too much risk with worldly women. So it's not really like a cult of virginity. It's more just like the preferences have shifted dramatically because of the risk associated with it. And that's something that you can get from the MGTOW guys, is that they'll probably get kind of innately. Is like there's a risk associated with dating a woman, you know? And so if you're wanting to mitigate those risks, you're going to be more attracted to women who are, you know, virgins or more chaste, let's say. RDJ made a great scathing post about the people trying to cancel Chris Pratt. Mark Ruffalo also defended Pratt, which surprised me considering he's pretty big SJW. He might actually like Pratt, though. Like, just because somebody is kind of lefty doesn't mean they don't have personal relationships with other people on some level, you know? They're still people. Chris Pratt was also coming out to bat for James Gunn when James Gunn got fired, because he made a bunch of posts like 10 years ago. He made a bunch of pedophile jokes on Twitter and got kind of mobbed for it. And so, yeah, I mean, like, Chris Pratt is it surprising that Chris Pratt back? No, he knows James Gunn. So because he knows him and has a personal relationship with him, he cares about that person's well-being. And also probably is not a big believer that like James Gunn's, you know, it's basically 2010 edgy boy, like pedophile humor. Doesn't mean James Gunn's a pedophile at all. Nowadays, we probably wouldn't find the humor funny. It was kind of, to me, it kind of smelled like early Twitter humor, and it's not that funny, but anyway, probably doesn't believe that guy's a pedophile either. So of course he's going to come to bat for him. He knows him. Republicans really need to pull their heads out of their asses and also quit pandering to Democrats who don't like them or respect them. It's true. Hey, what was really heartwarming is that James Gunn stepped up to the plate to defend Pratt during all this too and return the favor. That is good. That is good. Again, you know, this is something that I think about with politics in America, is that because we're atomized, we're missing a lot of the personal relationships that would mitigate the craziness that we see now. This idea that people who vote for Trump are evil or something like that, that comes about because our relationships have been diminished with other people. We're less respectful and understanding and loving of the people in our lives who may not happen to share the same political views as us. We can characterize them as evil because we don't know them anymore. So we don't know enough people to view people as anything other than evil who disagree with us. Or we're capable of doing it because we're so atomized. I say we, I don't really mean me or you. I just mean like there's a collective, this is like a collective thing, you know. James Gunn was 40 in 2010. So, I mean, how old is, Trey Parker and Matt Stone were probably 40 in 2010, and they were telling pedophile jokes on South Park. You know? So, I'm almost 40. I don't really tell pedophile jokes, but I tell a lot of off-color jokes. Off stream for sure. Greetings from Bulgaria. Bulgaria. Sorry coming in late live. Really like all your content. Keep up the great work. Thank you. Some people are always edgy kids even into old age. Yeah. And it's true. Like Trey and Matt really haven't lost any of the edge they had from the 90s. Any recommended literature for young people in their 20s to read? For literature, I don't know. I mean, there's a million books out there that are great. I don't know. The Royal We. Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of anything special for people in their 20s. Just read books that you're interested in. And if you're reading the book and you get 100 pages into it and you don't like it or you're not interested in it, put it down and get a different book. Used bookstore sells them for $1 a piece. Just buy a stack, and if you don't like them, return them. What do you think of the fact that most things in entertainment in America seem to have or revolve on political and gender identity stuffs? I think that's actually not that true. I think there's tons of entertainment that doesn't revolve around that at all. I think that's where the focus is on things like Twitter and social media and YouTube. But I don't think that's really realistic. I think most books, it's pretty standard. They don't revolve around it. Some movies do, but most movies don't. I think you get a little bit more press surrounding it if they do. So I think this is just kind of a filtering thing where we're just more aware of it. And we're focusing more on the things that do and less on the things that don't, So the things that do just kind of pop out at us. Anyway, I'm looking at the time, and I probably need to wind this down. Ruffalo and Gunn have been on board with cancel culture before. It's true. Gunn was canceling Roseanne, for example. I think it's easy to demonize people they don't know, unlike Pratt. That's true. That's exactly my point. And I hope James Gunn's learned a lesson about it, too. Maybe he has. I'll have to sell Oathbringer. Yeah, Oathbringer is... Man, I read Words of Radiance. I'm like, this was pretty bad. Like, this is pretty boring. And then Oathbringer was like, this is... I don't know if it was as bad as some of those middle Wheel of Time books by Robert Jordan, but I think Sanderson's picked up too many of Robert Jordan's habits of just filling the book with stuff that doesn't matter. Yeah, I think the whole thing about cancel culture is like, you have an opinion that's not good, therefore you shouldn't work, which is stupid. You said something I don't like. You were racist at some point, therefore you should never work. And we got to either that'll burn itself out because it can't be sustained, or it'll either burn itself out because it can't be sustained and everyone gets too exhausted, or everybody will get canceled to the point where the people that are canceled will just kind of rise from the ashes because there's no one left. You'll have an alternative that will rise up and replace it because of all the cancel stuff. Trying to cancel Johnny Depp, all that kind of stuff. So what you're saying is the media is making it bigger than it seems. I think so too, and I'm part of the problem. I'll fully admit I'm part of the problem because I focus on these things, and I know that a lot of people that watch it want to focus on those things too. And it's, I'll just get real for a minute here. Let's look at my channel. Let's go sort by most popular. All right, let's take a look at this, guys. Let's look at just like most popular videos on my channel. I'll give you an idea of like why things are frustrating. In this way. Okay, I'm gonna pull the mask off a little bit. Okay, so here's my channel. 42.4 thousand subscribers. Most popular. So these are the most popular videos that I've done, like in order by what's most popular. So the most popular is what's the difference between a classical and a flamenco guitar. That might surprise you if you've never known that I have a degree in music. Vanilla WoW, what class should you pick? This was an old one, but it got a lot of views at the time because people were really interested in hopping on board Vanilla WoW stuff. The Mary Sue, the Paragon, and the Everyman. Now this one was very popular because it had the Mary Sue stuff and it made people very angry. So this one wasn't that popular because it was super informative. You notice I don't have a lot of Storycraft videos that are remotely in the same category. But this one was very popular because it made people mad. Last Jedi analysis made people mad. Bolshevik marketing, this made people mad. This was about what we're talking about, right? So people on my side like to watch this because it confirms how they feel, and people on the other side like to watch it because they hate me. Intro to Efficient Leveling. That's just Oblivion, man. Oblivion's a great... This is like... I would prefer if like these three were like the main stuff that people watch. And I've had people like, why are you doing all this gaming content? It's like, my most popular stuff is on gaming. This is gaming. This is gaming. Another Last Jedi video. Contempt for the Audience. Last of Us Part 2. Gaming. More guitar stuff. This is what I would prefer to have it be. Hollywood movies suck. More negative content. The PS5 pre-order mess. More gaming stuff. And again, negative gaming stuff. Does today's music suck? Negative. Nihilism, negative. Flamenco guitar techniques. Okay, that one's normal. You don't need Gillette's garbage razors. I'm focusing on the SJW stuff. This is an actual Storycraft video. Why stop playing classical guitar? Force Awakens sucks. Do critics suck? Right? Negative. Let's just look at how many are negative, okay? Let's look at how many are negative. So I'm going to count this one as negative, even though it's really just a general writing video. But negative. 1, 2, 3, negative. 4, negative. 5, negative. 6, negative. 7, negative. 8, negative. 9, negative. 10. Probably 11. This one's probably negative. 12, 13, 14. This is probably negative 2. 15. 16. Musicians are quitting the industry. 17. Force Awakens sucks. 18. Thanos and overpopulation. 19. Not negative. 20. This one's really not negative. I'm gonna count that one as negative. But it's like on a lawsuit, so I don't know. Not negative. I'm 20 negatives. This one is maybe negative, but it's really just me being silly. This one's negative, 21. This one's actually negative, but no, it's not that negative. 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. You know, I'm already at 33 negative videos, right? Now, I would say my positive to negative ratio is 10 or 20 to 1. So that means 90% of my content is positive, but it's the 10% where I choose to be negative in some way or talk about a controversial issue that gets all the views. Not being positive. So, you know, I'm heavily incentivized to be part of the problem. Heavily incentivized because I get money for being part of the problem. If I come on here and I could be the quartering, I could do what Ethan Van Sciver did and just talk nonstop about Star Wars for half a year. I can't stand doing that. I can't stand being negative all the time. I gotta be positive. And like this book, I mean, this is me being, it's kind of tough love, but it's really just me being super positive. Like, this is how you do positive, good things. This is how you get your shit done. Buy it and improve your throughput and enjoy your life more. I love doing gaming content because it's fun. I like to have fun and I like to talk about things which are fun and funny. But YouTube gives me money to shit talk. YouTube gives me money to do anti-SJW content. YouTube gives me money to talk about Star Wars. YouTube gives me money to talk about this or that person being bad. YouTube gives me money to talk about the bad people in entertainment. They just give me money to be negative. And I can't stand doing it too much, so I don't do it that much. But frankly, I doubt if any of you would be watching if I hadn't done some negative content to get your attention. I like your story crafting videos. Very informative. Thank you. You're one of the 1,300 people that watch them. That's a lot of people. But it's not 400,000. It's not 1 million. It's not the 1 million people who watch something else. Okay. So it's like it's like, hey, you can do this really good content that's, you can do a lecture on writing that's really informative and can help people, or you can do a guitar technique video that's really informative and help people, and you can help 1,000 people and get no money for it, basically get $10. Or you can talk about Star Wars and get $1,000. It's hard to not talk about Star Wars and not to make time for it. You know what I mean? The bigot sandwich scene in The Last of Us 2 is a great example of the cancel mentality. The bigot is sorry, but Ellie doesn't accept it at all. You don't forgive bigotry. That's true. Do you believe that it's like a belief in original sin, except there's no redemption. There's no Christ to redeem you. There's no sacrifice you can make to get yourself back and right with God either. Do you believe that there's any truth to the belief that psychedelic drugs open the third eye and allow a person to view other dimensions or the spirit realm? No, I think it's much more likely that you just open yourself up to demons, to demonic influence. Having done a lot of drugs. If you make videos that make people mad, you'll get a lot of views. It's true. So no, I don't think there's any truth to that. I've known people that were like, mushrooms cured my depression, but then they're just depressed again later. It doesn't provide any long-lasting benefit to them. It doesn't fix them. And other times it's like, oh, the next day he was a crazy barefoot hippie after taking all this acid. It's like that it's indicative of brain damage, guys. Reordering of the brain through drugs is not something you should seek. I think it's much more likely you open yourself up to demonic influence, which is why most of the people who appear to be demonically influenced use psychiatric drugs on some level, either things like psychedelics or just any kind of drugs in general, or they're on psychotropic medication. I found your channel years back because of your negative content and have stayed for all the positive stuff. Yeah, you got to do some of it, or like no one will pay attention. But I'm heavily incentivized to just be negative all the time. One thing that I like about John C. Wright's blog is that even though he talks about politics a lot, he tends to have a positive and optimistic outlook. I want to be positive and optimistic, but I don't think that many people are just going to watch videos of my cats and my chickens. What do you think of Graham Hancock's books? I haven't read them. Oh, Graham Hancock. What did he write? I haven't read them. Never read them, I don't think. Nope. They seem kind of fun and interesting. Meetings with the ancient teachers of mankind. I kind of like conspiracy theory stuff. I think it's kind of fun, but I don't take it that seriously. I actually joined from the Last of Us 2 rant. Well, thank you. The Greek word for one in the form of witchcraft forbidden in the Bible is pharmakeia, which some people think refers to the use of psychedelics. That's interesting. I haven't heard that. That's interesting. But yeah, I think... So, what are you doing when you take a drug? You're losing control of your consciousness. If you're using a drug to the point where you're high or like stoned or you're going on a trip, you're losing control of your consciousness. You're losing control of what's there. That to me is very dangerous spiritually, but it's also dangerous physically. Drunk driving is illegal for a good reason. When you're drunk, you can't process things correctly. People do stupid things when they're drunk. So if you're going to use a drug, part of the risk is knowing that you're not going to be in full control of your consciousness. You're not going to be doing the things that are normal and appropriate to do all the time. And there might be significant consequences to that if you choose to do them. That's not to say that there's not also like therapeutic uses for drugs. I talked about this with the nootropic video. It's like what most people want from nootropics is what they would get doing stimulants. We have therapeutic uses of stimulants, but most people don't use them therapeutically. They use them recreationally and have bad effects from them. Do you see parallels between fairy folklore and UFO beliefs? I think they're both function of human psychology, manifesting in different ways. I can see parallels. Yeah, there's ideas there, like the fairies kidnapping people, the UFOs kidnapping people, experiences that you can't quite remember and can't describe properly, Guys, let's legalize weed. No larger societal effects here. And there's also, so with marijuana, there's also the negative societal effect of enforcing the law. So how you regulate any substance is a matter, for me, it's a matter of prudence, not just a matter of rights. Like, in an absolute sense, you own your body, so you have the right to put what you want to into your body. But when you do that, there's a potential that you can harm other people depending on when and how you do it. So if you're doing a drug in your own home, whatever, that doesn't really have the potential to harm someone. If you're doing a drug while you're driving a car, you're producing a negligent situation and therefore you're culpable for it. So I kind of take the same line with marijuana. It's like, yeah, it should be legal, but it should be fine for any municipality to ban its use in public for sure, or to just ban it in general. Locally, you should be able to ban it if you want to. because the community doesn't like it or whatever. But it produces negative effects if you allow it to affect other people. It's as simple as that. And putting people in jail for 3 years because they wanted to put a substance in their body doesn't really create positive societal effects in general, right? So even that much of fear of punishment stops some people from doing the drug, but not enough for it to matter. Instead, you're just you're spending a lot of resources putting people in jail who probably don't need that amount of jail time or that kind of negative consequence. Like a fine would probably be enough to stop most people from doing marijuana, or even at something that's on their permanent record. Well, even Christ got angry and threw merchants from a temple. You got to be negative sometimes. Yeah, it's not about being positive all the time, but it's like you got to have a balance. If you're just going to get on and if you're going to be like the quartering and just get on and bitch for every single video, no matter what, then you're going to come off as a grifter because you're not putting anything positive in the world. I write books. At least I put out some good stuff. Do you see parallels between fairy folklore and UFO belief? Oh, yeah, I just did that one. Does a pill form of pot exist that just relieves allergy issues without the other dude weed side effects? Yes, it's called Marinol. It's existed way before they legalized weed. It's a synthetic form of THC and a therapeutic dose. Which means it's a low enough dose that it's not going to cause significant psychological effects, but can lower the pressure in the eye for glaucoma and things like that. It's called Marinol. It's been on the market for a long time. Now, people pretended that those things didn't exist for the whole medical marijuana debate, that you couldn't get THC in some form of therapeutic pill form. But to be fair, on the other side, Marinol is not like a super cheap drug, right? It's a synthetic drug, so you got to pay money for it. Whereas marijuana is really cheap to grow. You just can throw the seed. You can literally throw the seeds in some dirt and put some water on them, and marijuana grows. Grows like crazy. Not necessarily good marijuana, but you can grow cannabis a lot, really easily. So if you grow your own cannabis, it's basically free to use your drug. It's really easy. What I meant about John C. Wright and optimism is that even when he talks about politics, he often focuses on victories and constructive advice. He's upbeat about it all. Yeah. Libertarians like to say that society isn't a victim until their children see the things they hate on TV and think it's normal. Yeah. It's like society has no values. Only people have values. Right? So trying to cultivate the values of society is always something where it's like you're talking to something that exists on its own. It's the people that have the values. And so if people want to construct their communities in a way that reflect their values, I don't really have a problem with that. In fact, I approve of it because I want my community to have my values so that we can live a lifestyle that we all like. I recently had several psychiatry appointments, and my family encouraged me to try asking for antidepressants. I didn't need antidepressants. I just needed someone to talk about mental health issues. That's good. It's good, Garrett. And this is the other thing, too, is I think we've had 30 years of a pharmacological culture, medicated nation. Who wrote that song? Nevermore. All right. Take your pills. And you get this on personalities like, take your pills, take your pills. And it's like, antidepressants are serious drugs. I'm not going to say that there's people who don't need to take them somewhere somehow, but you shouldn't. That should be your first go-to. Is like, I feel bad. Let's take antidepressants. And in fact, SSRIs, select serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are the main form of antidepressants they give out now, can cause suicide. They can cause suicidal ideation, and several people have said that they actually cause madness. So there's risks to taking any kind of drug. So for me, my personal approach with any drug, whether it's aspirin or it's something stronger, is, do I actually need to take this? Because if I can get away with not taking it, I probably want to. I stopped taking all allergy medication last year. I started taking a bunch of allergy medication in the last couple months because of the fires. Now I really am wanting to stop taking because I'm like, I don't need it. I don't want to be putting putting a pill in my body every day. I just don't want to do it. Even though Sudafed kind of helps with the diet, because it's a stimulant. It's a mild stimulant. I just don't want to do it. I want to deal with it in another way if I can. Get more sleep. If you want to see some fun conspiracy theory stuff, I recommend the YouTube channel Art Alien TV. He covers evidence of a possible past civilization on Mars using NASA rover images. See, I love stuff like that. Or suppositions about, this cycle of history may be longer than we realize, we may have had a cataclysm before. I've read up on the alien abduction phenomenon, and the evidence seems to point toward it being a form of demonic oppression combined with deception to hide its true nature. Well, it could be that. It's like as soon as you stop believing that demons can be a thing, you just start replacing them with aliens and things like that. It's kind of funny. It's like we have to believe in the supernatural in some way. Yeah. Yeah, but that's good. I hope you're doing better, Garrett. I said this with nootropics, is people are looking for a medical solution. They're looking for a substance to put in their body to solve a problem that they haven't really thought about or addressed. And their problem might be, I'm not motivated to work, or I don't have enough time to work. Those two things. If you're not motivated to work, you have to think about, do I really want to do what I'm doing? Or is this a temporary thing that I can work through until I become motivated again? And on the other side, if I don't have enough time to work, well, what can I change about my schedule so I do have time to work? Rather than I'm going to stay up all night working, taking stimulants, or I need to squeeze as many words as possible out of the 30 minutes a day I have to work. It's like, can you free up an hour and have that be a more relaxed, fun experience? Maybe you can eat your meals faster. Maybe you need to sleep more. I don't know, So a lot of times people are looking to solve problems that involve scheduling and self-motivation rather than they're actually needing nootropics. They're looking for a substance to solve a problem that is really a substance is not necessary to solve the problem. Do you think the reliance of medicines in our body will affect whatever the next mutation or evolution of humans, like maybe weak immune system or something? I have no idea. I'm not a big believer in those sorts of big evolutionary shifts. The genome's too complex to predict something like that, in my opinion, as well. And in fact, even though we can map a human genome, we actually don't understand heredity very well. There's lots of things about heredity that the best guess is they're second or third order effects of DNA that we don't really understand, or they're somehow inherited through some other mechanism that isn't visible to us. Heredity is not completely understood. Just because we know how genes encode proteins doesn't mean we understand everything about heredity. We don't understand how wolves know to howl. You could take a wolf, take it from its mommy when it's a pup, put it in isolation. It will howl at the moon. Where's the protein encoded in their DNA for howling at the moon? You're probably not going to find it, but it's definitely an inherited trait. Behavior, instinct. Are these things coded in proteins? Are these coded in DNA? DNA just creates proteins, guys. DNA is the code for making proteins. That's how DNA works. So why do wolves howl at the moon? We don't understand heredity fully. Science doesn't understand heredity fully to understand that. We understand part of it. And the part that we understand can be very useful. It's like you have this defective gene that causes breast cancer. Like, whoa, that's cool to be able to predict. But at the same time, it's like, you could take, if you had taken my son and he had never met me, he'd be like pretending that he was the necromancer in someone else's house after he's stolen. It's like, where did he get this from? It's because he's my kid, right? He has something that he inherited from me that can't really be mapped using proteins. Some think Ouija boards were debunked through groups' collective subconscious notions of the dead man, but that's just a demon. You don't know if you're getting the right answers. Yeah, I think Ouija boards are an object. It's all about what you're asking the Ouija board to do. So you're asking the Ouija board to do something supernatural, which means you're inviting demonic presence. Even if it doesn't work, you're at least asking for that to happen. So are Ouija boards magically evil? No, they're not magically evil. They're an object. It's what you ask the object to do that matters. It's kind of like praying to a demon, You're asking the object to do something. You're asking the object to do something which is dangerous, that you know is dangerous. Right. Genetic memory is something I wish I looked into more. I don't know if it's in genes. Well, I mean, it might be in genes, but it may not be in DNA. People wondered if it was cytoplasmic factors or like where it comes from. It could be something that is non-material. I mean, we always assume that everything that exists is the result of material function. Material worldview is completely omnipresent. But I guess the more I know about things, the more I learn about things, the more I'm like, a material explanation is insufficient in most cases. Either we don't understand everything that exists in the material world, or there's parts of the world that are separate from what we conceive of as the material world, which also are having effects. Things like personality and things like that. Why would anyone mess with a Ouija board? It's just not a good idea. I don't know. I know you just got here, but I actually need to call the stream because it's 3 o'clock and I've done this for 2 hours. So I need to call it at 2 hours because otherwise it really gets overhand. It really gets overboard. But I do appreciate everybody stopping by and hanging out with me. I guess I didn't get to any games. I did put out a little video on WoW leveling today, so I am playing retail WoW. I'm on Sargeras, which is where I've been for a long time. So if you want to play with me, I'm not going to play that deep in the expansion. I have friends who want to play with me. That's why I'm playing. Because I'm very aware of the cycle of WoW, and I'll probably do a separate video on this later today. There's a cycle to these things, and once they get you on the treadmill, once you realize you're on the treadmill, it's fine to stop, and that's probably when I'll stop. Is I'll be like, you know what? I've leveled up. I've seen all the content. We did all the instances. Maybe we did the first raid. It's going to be this for 6 months. It's going to be doing the same raid for 6 months because that's the way that Blizzard does it. I'll be like, okay, it's time to quit and play Genshin Impact again or something else, or just play something different. You know? Yeah. There's a Discord. Occasionally I'm on Discord, but I'm not on it that much. So you may see me, may not. Keys to prolific creativity, help you establish your creative process. And Eyes in the Walls, this is what I wrote last November for NaNoWriMo. And I don't know what I'll write. You know, I got a book I need to kind of finish up this week if I can. And then I'll think about what I want to like plow into in November and see what I can get done. And maybe get something out in November and get something out in December and kind of polish off the year with 4 books. I'll be pretty happy if I'm able to do that. So, considering all the roadblocks I've had in my life this particular year, but all in all, it's been good. It's been a good, productive year in general. I just probably won't see the results of it till next year. That's okay. What are your thoughts on Kiss and ABBA? I like Kiss. I actually like ABBA, but I just don't listen to either one very much. That's it. All right, thanks, guys, and I will. Might be making a... People are theorizing that Aeon may be making a classic server. Classic Aeon, guys. Classic Aeon had some of the best PvP I've ever played. Classic Aeon was killer. What a cool game. Now, it turns into an Asian grind fest the last like 20 levels or so, but it had some cool design. I'm a big fan of Aeon. I loved playing Aeon. Do you think when we are given our new bodies, when we get to heaven, it will look similar to our earthly body? I don't know. I don't know if we'll have if you believe in the resurrection of the body, then it's our body. It's your body. It's not going to be a different body. It's going to be your body. So it would be your body. That's it. I don't know how different it would end up looking because of something else that we don't know yet, but... if you believe in the resurrection of the body, it's your body. I guess that's all I have to say about it. So I believe it'll be your body. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you guys next time. You know what? Let me give away a free book. Let me see what we want. Let's do Eyes in the Walls. I'm going to give it away real quick, okay? I think this is an older version, so there might be typos. Let me put this in the chat. Where's my books? It's a book funnel link. Here it is, Eyes on the Walls. I'm like, did I ever? Sure, I gave this away. All right, let's check this one. Let's edit. Expiration date. Let's make that expire on the 26th. And we will copy this and put it in the chat. Here you go. There's a NaNoWriMo book for you. And it's Christian. So if you're wanting Christian horror, yeah, somehow I managed to do that, but don't like it. Eyes in the walls. There's a great picture. This has a bunch of psychotropic stuff in it too. Like, it's not a criticism of psychology, but it is, I don't know, there is some terror involved with some psychological aspects. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. Anyway, if you already bought it, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate that you bought it. If you haven't bought it, you can read it now. And if you really liked it, drop a review on the Amazon page. That really helps me out. More reviews is always better. It's the social proof. Lets other people know that other people have indeed read it and enjoyed it. So thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next time.